Hello everybody. Today I'm going to talk to you about something that has been on my mind for quite a while. As we all know, when Bungie introduced seasons and activities, the activities were always removed eventually at the end of the yearly cycle. While this wasn't the best, it was acceptable, and from a certain point of view you could sort of understand why they did it, but Bungie does this a lot, as in removing content or making it obsolete. Let's look at Lost Sectors for example. While they're still in the game, they're a shell of their former selves. At their prime, each day would drop a different type of exotic armor piece. Monday could have been helmets, Tuesday could have been legs, and so on. This was good because it was the closest thing we had to target farming exotic armor, and at the time, it was the only way to obtain new exotics released with the seasons. This would eventually expand to Vex Strike Force from Lightfall, so now there were two sources, but Lost Sectors were still the go-to for farming. Bungie in fact expanded on Lost Sectors and made it so you could actually farm certain world weapons depending on the day. But everything changed when the final shape happened. Rahul was given the ability to focus exotic engrams into specific exotics that we wanted, at a heavy cost. By itself, this was simply a positive, but as seems to be a reoccurring issue, Bungie decided to change Lost Sectors at the same time, pretty much making them null and void. They made it so Lost Sectors now dropped exotic engrams instead of actual armor. You could take these engrams and any exotic engrams from any sources to Rahul and do various different decoding options. You could spend an engram, 60,000 glimmer, and 2 ascendant shards to decode into a specific exotic, or you could use an engram and an exotic cipher instead. There was also random decoding where you could spend an engram, 30,000 glimmer, and 10 enhancement prisms to decode into a random engram from a specific DLC, though this was the entire exotic loot pool, so not really worth it. Finally, you had what was essentially the original Lost Sector system, where each day it will rotate to a specific armor piece, and then you can spend 1 engram to decode into that random armor piece. The reason I don't think that is good is because you're likely farming for a specific exotic. Originally, when you got that exotic, if it was the role you needed, you were done. If not, you were back to the grind. Having to now go to Rahul to randomly decode, even for free, is bad. Because you either go to Rahul every time you get an exotic engram to see if it's what you needed, which means having to load into the tower every time, which can take a while depending on the lobby. Or you could stockpile exotics and then go decode 10 at once. But if the first exotic you got was the role you needed, you've now just wasted time farming for 9 extra exotics, which might be nice to keep, but they're not really needed. I don't think Lost Sectors needed to change at all with Rahul. If you really wanted them to be a source of exotic engrams, then I would have preferred seeing them be added to the master rewards instead of replacing the actual exotics. I haven't really done any Lost Sectors at all since the final shape, but especially during Edge of Fate and Renegades, I have no issues getting exotic engrams, and I'm sure not many people are running Lost Sectors, if really at all. What I'm really trying to say from all of that is Bungie tends to introduce something and at the same time reduce something else. I'll give you another example. Grandmaster Nightfalls. With the new tier system that we got in Edge of Fate, a lot of past weapons aren't exactly in a good spot. They've essentially been sunset or paracrept, but there are still a lot of good weapons out there, the most prominent being Lotus Eater, a void micro-missile sidearm from Nightfalls, which is also the only void micro-missile sidearm in the game, making it very sought after. When Edge of Fate released, Bungie introduced the Conquests, their new counterpart to Grandmaster Nightfalls, which also replaced them. They were not counterparts, or even close to being the same. At launch, you could only do them once, and they did not offer any unique weapons. They were a good addition, don't get me wrong, but they weren't the successor to Grandmasters that Bungie wanted. But like with Lost Sectors, Bungie changed Grandmaster Nightfalls by removing them. So now only Nightfalls exist, still on a weekly rotation for the strike, but all the Nightfall weapons are now in the loot pool, so trying to farm a specific weapon is practically impossible. You have to first hope you get the weapon, then you have to first hope you get the role you want, and the chance of that happening, at least on your first attempt, is pretty much impossible. It also doesn't help that the only Nightfall mode with matchmaking is Advanced, which is the lowest possible difficulty. That has Nightfall weapons as an uncommon reward compared to Expert or Master, which is common. Bungie really seems to have a habit of introducing something and at the same time making what is essentially the precursor to whatever they introduce much worse. Grandmaster Nightfalls would have actually helped to keep that weekly sort of cadence that Bungie wants for Destiny. Imagine if suddenly this week's Nightfall weapon is the Lotus Eater, which is still really good even against tiered weapons. And while I think about it, seasonal challenges got removed in favor of the order system. But again, there would have been no harm in keeping seasonal challenges, and in fact, they could have been used as a way to direct players to specific activities that may or may not see much activity. They could have even been used to give players specific roles of certain weapons, such as, this is the third time I'm mentioning it, but Lotus Eater. I do think that is Bungie of old though. With no more seasons or episodes, I cannot see Bungie removing any more activities from the game, and I really hope current activities don't get lessened because Bungie is adding something that is similar, but still very different. As always, thank you for watching, have a great day.